Imagine waking up one day and realizing you can't remember what you enjoy. Not because of memory loss, but because you've never actually asked yourself. In Japan, there's a growing phenomenon psychologists are calling empty mind syndrome, people who followed society's script so perfectly that they've completely lost touch with their own desires, passions, and identity. They're alive, functional, successful even, but internally, there's nothing there. Just emptiness. Today, we're exploring one of modern psychology's most disturbing discoveries: what happens when conformity becomes so complete that the self simply disappears. And why this could be happening to you right now without you even realizing it. Empty mind syndrome doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of decades of systematic identity suppression that Japanese culture accidentally perfected. From childhood, Japanese individuals learn a dangerous lesson: your authentic self is a burden to others. Every spontaneous desire, every unique interest, every individual preference must be evaluated through one lens: does this fit the collective expectation? Psychologists call this identity foreclosure, when you adopt an identity without ever exploring who you actually are. In Japan, this isn't a teenage phase, it's a lifelong mandate. Consider the typical life path. Students choose careers based on family expectations and social prestige, not personal interest. They join companies that assign their identity: you're not Kenji who loves astronomy, you're a Toyota employee, Section 3. Marriages are often arranged or socially orchestrated. Even hobbies are frequently chosen based on what's respectable. The self never gets a chance to develop because every decision point is predetermined by external forces. Your job isn't to discover yourself, it's to fulfill your assigned role perfectly. But here's what makes empty mind syndrome so insidious: people don't realize it's happening. The erasure is so gradual, so normalized, that most people believe this emptiness is their authentic self. By the time they notice something's wrong, the damage may already be profound. Empty mind syndrome typically reveals itself during life transitions: retirement, divorce, children leaving home, moments when the external structure suddenly disappears. That's when the terrifying question emerges: who am I without my role? And for many Japanese people, the answer is genuinely nothing. They can't name their favorite color. They don't know what music they enjoy. They have no dreams, no passions, no desires. Decades of perfect conformity have created a psychological void. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, the inability to maintain a coherent sense of self. In Japan, it manifests as profound existential confusion paired with emotional numbness. People describe feeling like actors who've been playing a role so long they've forgotten it's not real. Except now the play is over, and they can't remember who they were before the performance began. The workplace offers the clearest examples. When Japanese salarymen retire after 40 years of company devotion, many experience complete psychological collapse. Without the corporate identity, there's literally nothing left. This is when empty mind syndrome becomes dangerous. The peak of empty mind syndrome is both subtle and devastating: people functioning perfectly in society while experiencing complete internal desolation. They wake up, go to work, fulfill obligations, smile appropriately, but report feeling like hollowed-out versions of human beings. One patient described it as being a walking resume with no person attached. The psychological terminology is depersonalization, feeling disconnected from your own existence. But in Japan, it's so widespread it's become normalized. People assume this emptiness is just adult life. Here's where it gets truly disturbing: empty mind syndrome often doesn't register as depression. There's no sadness because sadness requires caring about something. These individuals have been so thoroughly conditioned to ignore their inner world that they've lost the capacity to feel much of anything. Therapists report patients who can't answer basic questions: what makes you happy? I don't know. What do you want? Whatever is appropriate. What's your dream? Blank stare. The economic implications are staggering. Japan has millions of people doing jobs they feel nothing about, maintaining relationships devoid of genuine connection, living lives that feel like elaborate performances with no actual performer. Social scientists link this to Japan's declining birth rates, people too empty to desire anything, including family. To the rise of herbivore men, young males with no ambition or sexual interest. To the explosion of virtual relationships, it's easier to feel something for an anime character than to access your own buried emotions. When an entire generation loses touch with desire itself, what happens to society? Understanding empty mind syndrome requires exploring how identity actually forms in the brain, and what happens when that process is systematically disrupted. Neuroscience shows that the self isn't a fixed thing, it's a narrative your brain constructs from experiences, choices, and desires. The medial prefrontal cortex is your self-reference region, constantly updating your identity story. But here's the critical part: this system requires input. It needs you to make authentic choices, pursue genuine interests, and experience real consequences. Without this data, the self-narrative can't form properly. Japanese cultural conditioning essentially starves this system. Every choice is predetermined. Every interest must be socially acceptable. Every desire gets filtered through collective expectations. The brain's identity formation system has nothing authentic to work with. Over time, this creates what psychologists call narrative identity deficit. Your brain literally cannot construct a coherent story of who you are because all the chapters were written by someone else. Research on conformity reveals something chilling. When people consistently suppress authentic responses in favor of group consensus, brain regions associated with self-representation actually decrease in activity. You can functionally turn off your sense of self through chronic conformity. Empty mind syndrome is the endpoint of this process, a brain that's lost the ability to generate self-referential content. The neural pathways for "what do I want" have atrophied from disuse. Most devastatingly, this creates a psychological paradox. The emptier you become, the harder it is to recognize something's missing. You need a self to notice the absence of self. But there is a way back. Here's the hopeful truth: identity can be rebuilt. The self is remarkably resilient when given the opportunity to re-emerge. Japanese therapists are pioneering techniques specifically for empty mind syndrome. The process starts small, almost absurdly small. What tea do you prefer? If you automatically say whatever everyone else is having, you're instructed to actually taste different teas and notice your preference. This sounds trivial, but it's neurologically crucial. Every small authentic choice reactivates dormant self-reference pathways. You're literally teaching your brain to recognize your own preferences again. Desire archaeology is another powerful technique, digging through childhood memories to find moments before conformity training began. What did you love at age 5? What made you curious before that curiosity was redirected toward productive pursuits? Some therapists use identity experiments, trying new activities specifically because you have no social script for them. When there's no right way to approach pottery or salsa dancing, authentic responses can emerge. The younger generation is pioneering micro-rebellions, tiny acts of individuality that slowly reconstruct identity. Choosing unusual hair colors. Pursuing unconventional hobbies. Asking "what do I want" before "what should I want." Recovery requires patience. You're not discovering yourself, you're building yourself, possibly for the first time. Empty mind syndrome isn't exclusive to Japan, it's just most visible there. Every culture that prioritizes conformity over authenticity creates versions of this phenomenon. Ask yourself honestly, how many of your life choices were genuinely yours? Your career, was it what you wanted, or what seemed practical? Your hobbies, do they reflect your interests, or what's socially acceptable? Your values, did you choose them, or absorb them? When was the last time you did something purely because you wanted to, with no consideration of external judgment? Social media has turbocharged this globally. We curate identities based on likes and engagement, performing versions of ourselves for algorithmic approval. The authentic self gets buried under layers of strategic self-presentation. Corporate culture worldwide mimics Japanese conformity. Your identity becomes your job title, your self-worth measured in productivity. Who are you when the laptop closes? Here's the terrifying question: how would you know if you had empty mind syndrome? The defining feature is not knowing something's missing. Try this experiment. List 5 things you genuinely want, not should want, not practical goals, but authentic desires. If you struggle, you might be emptier than you think. But here's the empowering truth: awareness itself is the first step toward recovery. The moment you ask, "Who am I really?" that's the moment authentic self begins to emerge. Your identity isn't given to you by culture, family, or society. It's something you build through conscious choices, authentic experiences, and brave self-exploration. So I challenge you, this week, make one choice based purely on your preference, regardless of external expectations. Notice how it feels. That feeling? That's your authentic self, waiting to be rediscovered. Because a life lived as someone else's idea of you isn't really a life at all. And the most radical act of rebellion available to any of us is becoming genuinely, unapologetically ourselves.